And today, a lot of nations are fighting for their survival, sovereignty, and peace. And the Sahel region is part of the area feeling heavy pressure and influence of imperialism.
Burkina Faso just dragged Africa's so-called giants through the mud. While Nigeria drowns in oil wealth, it still can't stop the cycle of loans, while Kenya is a tech hub, but can't build without the World Bank. While South Africa struts with platinum but remains chained to foreign capital, tiny Burkina Faso lined up 764 heavy-duty machines, paid for by its own hands, with no donor attached. It wasn't aid, it wasn't a loan, it wasn't charity, it was sovereignty, bulldozed into existence. And if that doesn't give a reason to fight the rest of Africa, then what will? Let's get into it. In a continent where every new highway ribbon is usually tied with donor flags, where every bridge comes with a plaque praising foreign partners, and where presidents stand smiling beside World Bank officials as if they were schoolboys given new toys, Burkina Faso has just shattered the script. On a blazing afternoon in Ouagadougou, Captain Ibrahim Traoré unveiled 764 heavy-duty road construction machines. Bulldozers, graders, compactors, and excavators stretched in neat rows, shimmering under the Sahel sun. No foreign ambassador cut the ribbon. No IMF delegation hovered in the background. No European minister was there to give a lecture about fiscal responsibility. It was a Burkinabe show, financed with Burkinabe wealth. This wasn't just an infrastructure delivery. It was a political earthquake. Africa's smaller nations are used to making headlines for disasters, coups, or crises. Rarely do they dominate the news cycle for outpacing the continent's biggest economies. Yet suddenly, a country with fewer resources than Nigeria, fewer international ties than Kenya, and far less industrial clout than South Africa, has delivered something those so-called giants could not: development without dependency. The shock was immediate. Commentators across Africa scrambled to rationalize it. Some tried to downplay the announcement as symbolic. Others whispered that the machines wouldn't last. But the truth gnawed at them. Burkina Faso had achieved what the larger economies had failed to do. It has been proven that development is not chained to foreign aid. And that truth burned, because it didn't just expose Burkina Faso's courage, it exposed everyone else's cowardice. What makes this announcement so powerful is not the sheer number of machines, but the symbolism of independence. It is a message written in steel that resonates far beyond Ouagadougou. These machines will soon cut across dusty roads and connect forgotten towns. But even before the first shovel of dirt is moved, they have already reshaped Africa's political imagination. They have reminded the continent that aid dependency is not a natural condition, it is a political choice. And that is why this news has hit a nerve. It is not just a Burkinabe achievement, it is a continental humiliation. Every African watching knows what this means. It means we can't keep blaming colonial history or Western domination for everything, at least not without admitting that some leaders still choose dependency. Burkina Faso has proved there is another path. What makes this sting even more is how Traoré framed the announcement. There were no apologies, no self-congratulation, no calls for Western validation. The machines simply appeared, lined up as proof that the state could deliver. It was a statement of quiet defiance, and in that silence lay its power. In the absence of donor speeches, the machines themselves spoke. Africa can build Africa. This is why the announcement reverberates far beyond infrastructure. It is not just about roads. It is about pride. It is not just about machines. It is about the restoration of dignity. Burkina Faso's delivery of 764 machines is the kind of news that unsettles elites in Nairobi, Abuja, and Pretoria more than it unsettles Washington or Paris. Because it reveals something terrifying to them. Their people will start asking why a landlocked nation under sanctions can do this while they cannot. And so the question lingers, haunting every African leader still bound to donor conferences and IMF loans. If Burkina Faso can stand on its own, what excuse do you have? Let's be blunt. In most of Africa, machines of this scale arrive stamped with foreign insignia. You see, donated by the European Union, financed by the World Bank, or a gift from China. Every blade, every tire, carries the reminder that African roads are not built on African terms. Infrastructure is too often paraded as charity instead of sovereignty. And the people clap, not because their governments delivered, but because their governments begged successfully. That humiliation has been normalized for decades. Now look at Ouagadougou. Rows of machines stretch out under the sun with no donor's flag, no external logos, no politician parroting words of gratitude to some foreign partner. Just Burkinabe machines bought with Burkinabe money. That silence is deafening. The absence of donor symbolism is the loudest message Africa has heard in years. These machines are declarations. We can build without you. And make no mistake, every leader on the continent saw those images and felt the sting. In Abuja, Nairobi, and Pretoria, elites are scrambling for excuses. They'll say Burkina Faso is too small to matter. They'll say it's a one-off stunt. But what they cannot deny is the raw truth. If Burkina Faso can line up 764 machines without donors, then dependency is no longer inevitable. It's a choice. That's why these machines are more dangerous to the old order than any protest or speech. Because unlike words, they cannot be dismissed as rhetoric. They are physical, immovable proof that sovereignty can be bought with courage. They embody something no IMF report, no donor conference, no think tank paper can erase. Africa can provide for itself if leaders dare to reclaim resources. But let's also be clear about the psychological warfare at play here. For decades, Western donors have mastered the art of infantilizing African states. They hand over a few buses, cut ribbons on small hospitals, or launch food aid projects and expect governments to perform gratitude like circus acts. Burkina Faso just turned that script upside down. The government didn't stand there saying, "Thank you." It stood there saying nothing because there was no foreign master to thank. The machines themselves were the speech. And this silence travels. It travels to Mali, where citizens wonder why aid dependency still drags on. It travels to Niger, where uranium wealth has long served Paris instead of Niamey. It travels even to the streets of Johannesburg, where the industrial heart of Africa now appears hollow in comparison to the audacity of a Sahelian state under sanctions. Each machine is like a mirror held up to the rest of the continent, forcing Africans to ask, what excuse do our leaders have now? Of course, machines alone don't explain how this miracle was financed. Critics will argue, where did the money come from? Burkina Faso doesn't have the reserves, and that's exactly the point. These machines are not only symbols of construction, they are breadcrumbs leading us to the source of this sovereignty. Because behind them lies the radical decision that made this possible, seizing control of Burkina Faso's wealth at its root. That wealth isn't in donor pledges or foreign loans. It's buried deep underground, shining in veins of gold that, for decades, built Europe's fortunes while Burkina Faso starved. The real story, then, is not just the arrival of machines, but the radical change in where the money came from. Let's pause for a second to say big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. If the machines were the evidence, then gold was the motive. Because let's be honest, 764 machines don't just fall from the sky. They are bought, paid for, and delivered. And in Burkina Faso, the money trail doesn't lead to donor accounts in Brussels or IMF tranches in Washington. It leads underground, straight to the veins of gold that foreign corporations plundered for decades, while Burkinabe citizens were told to tighten their belts. For years, Burkina Faso was the classic African paradox, a top gold producer with a population drowning in poverty. Western companies, aided by local elites, treated the mines as private vaults. Ton after ton of ore was shipped abroad, refined elsewhere, and sold on global markets. The state collected taxes that barely covered salaries for bureaucrats. Meanwhile, citizens were told to wait patiently for development that never came. Aid donors filled the gap, patting themselves on the back for supporting a country that was in fact bleeding wealth every single day. Enter Ibrahim Traoré. With one stroke of policy, he turned the entire system upside down. Strategic mines were placed under national control. Contracts that siphoned profits abroad were frozen. Foreign operators were told the game had changed. For the first time since independence, Burkinabe Gold would fund Burkinabe development. And suddenly, The impossible became reality. The treasury had money. Not borrowed money, not aid money, but sovereign money. Money that answered to no one but the Burkina Faso people. This is why the machines mattered so much. They weren't financed by some generous friend. They were financed by stolen wealth finally brought home. It's as if decades of looted treasure had been dragged back from European vaults and poured into bulldozers, buses, and hospitals. For the first time, citizens could see their country's wealth not as numbers in donor reports, but as tangible projects rising in their communities. And here's the bitter truth. Burkina Faso's gold was never poor. The country was made poor by the way its gold was managed. This is the same story across Africa. Nigeria's oil enriches others. Congo's cobalt powers foreign tech. South Africa's platinum props up global industry. The resources are never the problem. The problem is who controls them. Traoré understood that sovereignty begins not in parliaments or speeches, but in mines and fields. Until you control the source of wealth, you control nothing. Of course, this move rattled feathers far beyond Ouagadougou. Western capitals whispered about investor confidence and risks to stability. Translation: their profits had been interrupted. International institutions fretted about fiscal sustainability, as if Burkina Faso hadn't just proven that sovereignty is more sustainable than debt. But for ordinary Africans watching, the message was electrifying. If gold can be taken back, what else can? Nationalization wasn't just economic policy, it was psychological warfare. For decades, Africans were told they were too poor to finance development without aid. Traoré smashed that lie. He showed that the riches buried under African soil are enough, if leaders dare to reclaim them. And once gold revenues started pouring in, they didn't vanish into offshore accounts or donor-controlled development programs. They were redirected straight into the machinery of state building, infrastructure, health, education, transport. But wealth alone doesn't make nations strong. Gold can buy machines, but it cannot feed the people. Traoré understood that true independence isn't just about reclaiming mines, it's about breaking the deadliest form of dependency of all, food dependency. Because what good is sovereignty if your people still eat from the donor's hand? And that brings us to the next battlefield in Burkina Faso's war for dignity, the struggle for food sovereignty. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Gold can buy machines, yes, but no nation can eat bulldozers. And that is precisely where Burkina Faso's revolution takes a sharper turn. After reclaiming wealth from the mines, Ibrahim Traoré set his eyes on the battlefield that has enslaved Africa longer than debt, longer than aid, even longer than colonial contracts: food. Because here's the cruel truth: the easiest way to control a nation is not through guns or loans, but through its stomach. For decades, Burkina Faso was deliberately kept hungry. Its fertile land was underused, its farmers undersupported, and its markets flooded with imports. Rice came from Asia, wheat from Europe, and food aid from the United States. Every drought became an opportunity for donors to swoop in with sacks of grain stamped with foreign flags, conditioning Burkina Faso citizens to believe survival depended on charity. That is not humanitarianism. It is domination dressed as kindness. Traoré called the bluff. If Burkina Faso could reclaim its gold, why not reclaim its food? And so, he launched a direct assault on dependency, pouring resources into agriculture as if it were the front line of war, which in truth, it is. Irrigation projects were expanded to push back the curse of drought. Seeds and equipment were distributed not as photo-op giveaways, but as investments in sovereignty. Processing plants were built for rice and tomatoes, so that Burkina Faso farmers would no longer be trapped in cycles of surplus rotting in the fields, while supermarkets were filled with imports. This shift is more than economic, it is political survival. Because every bag of imported rice is leveraged in the hands of foreign powers. If donors can feed you, they can starve you. And if they can starve you, they own your future. By producing its own food, Burkina Faso is cutting the cord that allowed outsiders to weaponize hunger. That is why this battle is so dangerous to the global order. Machines threaten dependency. Gold undermines exploitation. But food dismantles control itself. And here's where the bitterness really bites. Burkina Faso is proving a point that larger, richer countries refuse to confront. Nigeria has fertile plains and rivers, yet it still imports rice by shipload. Kenya brands itself the breadbasket of East Africa, but its shelves are stacked with imported wheat. South Africa boasts advanced commercial farming, yet its food chains are tethered to global corporations that dictate prices and supply. Meanwhile, Burkina Faso, landlocked, scarred by war, written off as fragile, is building an agricultural base that answers to no outsider. This is not charity. This is not an NGO pilot project. This is not donor-funded capacity building. It is the state, using its own reclaimed wealth, investing in the soil to feed its people. And that difference matters, because when donors fund agriculture, they own the results. But when the state funds agriculture, the people own the future. The transformation is already visible. Local rice production has expanded, reducing dependence on imports. Tomato processing plants are turning what was once waste into packaged goods. Livestock programs are improving resilience in rural areas. It's not flashy, it's not glamorous, but it's nation-building in its rawest form. Every new harvest that feeds Burkina Faso mouths is another nail in the coffin of dependency. But let's be clear, food sovereignty is not just about filling stomachs. It is about dignity. It is about a child growing up without associating survival with foreign flags. It is about citizens learning that their government, not donors, is responsible for their well-being. It is about transforming hunger from a tool of manipulation into a weapon of resistance. And yet, even food sovereignty cannot survive if corruption bleeds it dry. Because if reclaimed gold and reclaimed grain are diverted into the pockets of elites, then sovereignty collapses before it has even begun. Burkina Faso has lived this nightmare before. For years, donor money flowed in under the banner of development assistance, and yet the countryside saw little change. Why? Because aid created a class of professional rent seekers. Ministers, bureaucrats, and NGOs thrived on managing donor projects, each one a pipeline for kickbacks and mismanagement. Citizens learned to expect corruption as the tax of survival. Aid didn't just fail to fight corruption, it institutionalized it. Traoré's government decided enough was enough. The first step in his governance revolution was cutting off the drug of foreign aid itself. Once the dependency pipeline was shut, the parasites that fed on donor money suddenly lost their oxygen. By refusing IMF loans and donor programs, Traoré forced his government to live and die by its own revenues. That may sound harsh, but it was a surgical strike. If corruption thrived on aid, then starving aid meant starving corruption. But cutting aid alone wasn't enough. Real governance meant putting state money where citizens could see it. This is why the most powerful anti-corruption tool has been visibility. Citizens don't just hear about funds being spent, they see the results. Buses run in the cities, hospitals rise in towns, processing plants open in rural areas, and most symbolically, 764 construction machines stand as steel proof that wealth hasn't evaporated. Visibility kills corruption's favorite defense, secrecy. Of course, rooting out corruption requires more than projects. It requires punishment. Under Traoré, senior officials accused of embezzlement have been investigated, and some removed outright. The message is clear. The era of hiding behind donor networks is over. In Burkina Faso today, loyalty is measured not by connections to external financiers, but by delivery to the people. That shift is monumental. It changes the DNA of governance itself. This battle is not just administrative, it is existential. Because in Africa, corruption is more than theft, it is betrayal. It turns sovereignty into a hollow slogan. It turns aid into poison. And it convinces citizens that dignity is impossible. By confronting it directly, Traoré is not simply policing budgets, he is rewriting the contract between the state and the people. And here's where the bitterness lands hardest. Burkina Faso's fight against corruption exposes a deeper shame across Africa. Too many leaders hide behind the excuse that corruption is inevitable, that this is just how Africa works. That lie has been told for generations, usually by the same elites who benefit from the rot. Burkina Faso proves otherwise. By cutting aid, by redirecting national wealth, and by delivering visible projects, the state has shown that corruption can be strangled when dependency is removed. This governance revolution has implications far beyond Ouagadougou. For citizens in Lagos, Nairobi, Johannesburg, Bamako, and Kinshasa, the message is unmistakable. Sovereignty is not a dream reserved for future generations. It is possible now, but only if leaders are willing to kill the parasite within. Burkina Faso has shown that corruption isn't an untouchable monster. It's a parasite that survives only if you feed it. Stop feeding it, and the system breathes again. So let's be clear. The 764 machines are not just roads. The nationalized gold is not just wealth. The boosted food production is not just grain. Together, they are bricks in a fortress that only works if the foundation is governance. Traoré's war on corruption is the cement binding them all. The assurance that sovereignty is not another slogan, but a living reality. And that's why this final piece matters most. Because sovereignty without governance is a house of cards, but governance is tied to unshakable sovereignty. Burkina Faso has chosen the harder road, one that bigger African economies still refuse to walk. And until they do, Burkina Faso will continue to shame them with one bitter fact. Dependency was never destiny. It was always corruption's excuse. If Burkina Faso can do this with less, what excuse do richer African nations have? Let us know in the comments section. Are aid and loans really help, or just chains in disguise? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.